Before we dive into this wild ride, tell me in the comments what kind of story you'd love to see next, because your idea might just be the star of the next episode. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I always enjoy seeing just how far these Karen tales of chaos and karma manage to reach. The sun blazed over the valley, the air carrying the mixed scent of warm earth and fresh hay. My farm usually thrived on quiet routines, the low bellow of cows waiting for feed, the creak of the wooden gate, the rustle of chickens scratching for grain. But that morning, silence snapped like glass. A shrill voice tore across the pasture, shrieking my name as if the world itself were on fire. "Are you out of your mind, keeping these filthy beasts here?" I turned, feed bucket still in hand. Two women stormed toward me from the gravel path that led from a cul-de-sac to my fields. Their matching blonde hair gleamed unnaturally in the sun, as though they'd both died it the night before. Nancy, the older one by a few minutes, but louder by a mile, clutched a clipboard so tightly her knuckles whitened. Kayla, taller and broader, carried herself with an air of smug certainty. Together, they looked less like neighbors and more like prosecutors about to deliver a death sentence. Nancy jabbed her pen toward my cows, who had stopped chewing to gaze at the commotion. "These aren't pets. They're livestock, and livestock is against our HOA rules. You'll have to get rid of them immediately." I set the bucket down, squinting against the light. I was no stranger to ridiculous complaints. Someone once accused my rooster of crowing at midnight when I didn't even own one. But this was new. "This is agricultural land," I said evenly. "Bought and zoned for farming long before your HOA even existed. These cows belong here more than either of you do." Kayla barked a laugh that carried no humor. "Don't get smart. Property values are crashing because of you. The smell, the noise, the spectacle of it all." She gestured broadly, as if the mere sight of brown cows grazing in green grass was an offense against nature. Behind them, I spotted two teenagers peeking from the sidewalk, phones already out, recording. The sisters' arrival had turned my peaceful morning into a stage play, and I was suddenly the unwilling lead. Nancy stepped closer, her perfume clashing with the earthy scent of hay. "We've had enough. The board is filing a formal complaint. Fines will follow. And if you ignore them, we'll escalate to legal action. Believe me, we have the power to make your life miserable." My jaw tightened, but I kept my tone steady. Funny thing about power, it only works when people let it scare them. For a moment, her eyes flickered with uncertainty, but Kayla filled the silence with a sneer. "Don't think your little papers will protect you. We know how to bend the rules." I bent to pick up the bucket, deliberately slow, deliberately calm. The cows shifted behind me, tails swishing lazily, as though mocking the storm of human rage before them. "Go ahead," I said. "File your complaint. Just remember, when you lie, it has a way of coming back around." Their glares could have set dry straw ablaze. Then they spun on their heels and stomped back down the path, muttering about farm trash and redneck freeloaders. The teenagers hurried after them, still recording, still whispering. By nightfall, half the neighborhood would know the story, or at least the version Nancy and Kayla wanted told. That evening, as dusk painted the barn in shades of orange and violet, the first email arrived. The subject line read, "Notice of violation, unauthorized livestock." I read it twice, my pulse drumming in my ears. The language was sharp, almost militaristic. Fines, hearings, removal of property. Each word reeked of the sisters' fingerprints. The next day, whispers spread faster than wildfire. At the small grocery store in town, I overheard a man grumble to the cashier, "Can't believe someone thinks they can run a farm in the middle of a neighborhood." At the gas station, a woman shook her head at me and muttered, "Those cows don't belong here." Nancy and Kayla had wasted no time. They told anyone who would listen that I was dragging down home values, that the smell was unbearable, that noise kept them up all night. None of it was true, but truth rarely stands a chance against volume, and the sisters knew how to shout. Still, I refused to budge. I had zoning papers, title deeds, even letters from a county confirming my right to keep livestock. I delivered copies to the HOA office myself, sliding them across the table to the property manager. She barely looked up from her screen, muttering, "We'll let the board decide." Days turned into a week, and the harassment thickened like storm clouds. The sisters began staging little performances outside my fence. Nancy, dressed in her cream sundress, marched around with her clipboard, scribbling notes furiously. Kayla filmed herself grimacing at the cows, narrating for her camera as though she were documenting a crime scene. "Look at this. Disgusting. Unsafe. Completely against regulations." At first I ignored them, but one night I caught the glare of flashlight beams cutting across the pasture. I slipped outside and found Nancy and Kayla near the barn, whispering loudly enough for the cows to stir. When they saw me, Nancy plastered on a fake smile. "Just inspecting," she said. Kayla smirked like she owned the place. "Get off my property," I growled. My patience had worn thin. They left, but not before Nancy hissed, "Enjoy your cows while you can. Soon enough, they'll be gone." I lay awake for hours afterward, staring at the ceiling, the weight of their threat pressing down on me. My cows were more than animals. They were part of my livelihood, my peace, my history. Losing them would mean more than losing a farm. It would mean surrendering to people who thrived on control. 2 mornings later, I heard a commotion outside. Nancy and Kayla stood at the fence again, this time with half a dozen neighbors gathered behind them. Kayla raised her phone like a weapon. "These cows are dangerous. One charged at me yesterday. Nearly killed me." The crowd gasped. I stepped forward, hands open, voice steady. "That never happened. You weren't even near the pasture yesterday." Nancy clutched her clipboard to her chest, eyes glinting. "Do you have proof? Or are we supposed to take the word of a man who breaks community rules?" The neighbors shifted uneasily. Doubt bloomed where truth should have stood. My chest burned with frustration. I knew reason wouldn't work. I needed something stronger, something undeniable. That night, I sat in the barn, the soft breaths of cows filling the air, their calm presence a balm against my anger. I studied the sisters' tactics: lies, spectacle, manipulation. They weren't fighting fair. So fair wasn't going to save me. As the stars wheeled above the roof, I decided. The next move would be mine. And when it came, it would end this war on my terms. But I also knew one thing with absolute certainty. Nancy and Kayla had no idea what they'd started. The sisters did not let up. If anything, their campaign grew bolder with each passing day, as if my refusal to cave had lit a fire under their entitlement. Nancy began appearing in front of my gate at unpredictable hours, her cream dress swishing around her legs as she scribbled on her clipboard with theatrical fury. Kayla stood beside her like a bodyguard, phone raised, narrating every move with a voice sharpened to pierce through glass. "This is evidence," Kayla announced one afternoon, loud enough for every window on the street to catch it. "He keeps diseased animals in a residential zone. I'll be sending this straight to the board." My cows, unbothered, lifted their heads and stared at her with patient eyes. One let out a slow, echoing moo that rolled across the pasture like a sarcastic rebuttal. The small crowd of neighbors gathered at the sidewalk chuckled, but Kayla twisted her mouth into a grimace and shouted, "Aggression. Did you see that? Threatening behavior." Nancy pointed her pen at me through the fence. "Don't think we won't win this. We always win." I said nothing. I had already decided that words alone could no longer defend me. Each false accusation chipped away at my patience, but it also strengthened my resolve. The sisters believed that their performance was shaping reality, and for a time it was. But they hadn't considered what happens when the performance itself becomes evidence. Later that evening, I installed the first of several cameras along the property line. Sleek black devices, barely visible, but sharp enough to capture every twitch of their faces. The red recording light blinked once before vanishing into darkness. The next day, I added more, placing them near the barn, the gates, even by the water trough. If they wanted to show, I would record every second of it. The cameras didn't take long to pay off. 2 nights later, I caught them again near the barn. Nancy shined a flashlight into the cow's eyes, muttering loudly about poor conditions. Kayla filmed the animals squinting against the glare as though she were documenting abuse. From my vantage point inside the house, I smiled grimly. Every word, every step, was captured in crisp detail. By the end of the week, I had hours of footage. The sisters cursing, trespassing, inventing stories on camera. I clipped the best pieces together. Kayla screaming that a cow was charging, while the footage clearly showed the animal chewing grass without moving. Nancy insisting she was assaulted, while she stood untouched, shrieking at thin air. The absurdity spoke louder than any defense I could muster. That night, I opened a new account on social media and uploaded the first video with a simple caption: Karen versus cows. The response was immediate. By morning, the video had thousands of views. Comments poured in. Funniest thing I've seen all week. Those cows look more civilized than the humans. This is why HOAs are a nightmare. Within days, the series took off. Each clip drew more attention, each lie exposed in front of millions. News outlets picked up, labeling it the Karen Cow Saga. Neighbors who had once eyed me with suspicion now waved from their porches, their grin sly, as if they too had joined the audience against the sisters. But Nancy and Kayla didn't see themselves as clowns. They saw themselves as victims. And nothing is more dangerous than a pair of entitled people who feel cornered. The next HOA meeting was supposed to be routine, but it turned into theater. I sat at the back, hat pulled low, while the sisters presented their evidence to the board. Nancy read from her clipboard with trembling righteousness, while Kayla projected her shaky phone recordings onto a screen. Here, Kayla announced, pointing to the pixelated image of a cow's head. Look at the rage in its eyes. This is not safe. The room stifled laughter. Someone coughed into their hand, poorly disguising a chuckle. Nancy's face flushed. This is no laughing matter. These animals are a threat to property values, to safety, to everything this neighborhood stands for. I raised my hand. The board reluctantly nodded for me to speak. Calmly, I pulled out a USB stick and plugged it into the screen. The footage played. Nancy and Kayla trespassing, shouting, inventing threats, while the cows stood motionless. Laughter erupted. Someone in the back clapped. Nancy shrieked, "This is taken out of context." Kayla snapped, "You'll regret this. None of you understand the law like we do." But their words drowned beneath the ripple of amusement spreading through the room. Their credibility shattered in real time, their voices growing smaller the more they raised them. I left the meeting without waiting for the board's decision. It didn't matter anymore. Their downfall had already begun. The sisters doubled down, of course. They stormed my property the next evening, shouting about defamation, lawsuits, criminal charges. Nancy's face was red as fire, veins bulging at her temples, clipboard raised like a weapon. Kayla had her phone out, shoving it inches from my face as she spat accusations. "You think this is funny? You think you can embarrass us?" I stood calmly, hands in pockets, the cameras above us blinking silently. "Not funny," I said. "Just true." Nancy's scream cracked the still night air. She grabbed a fallen branch, waving it above her head as if she meant to strike. The cows shuffled but didn't scatter, their calmness mocking her rage. I dialed the police. When the officers arrived, the sisters spun their usual story. I had threatened them, the cows had attacked. But this time, I had proof ready. On my phone, I showed the footage from 10 minutes earlier. Every lie exposed in perfect clarity. The officers exchanged looks, their expressions hardening. Nancy and Kayla's protests grew frantic, their words colliding into shrieks, but the officers warned them sternly to leave or face charges. They left, but not in defeat, in fury. And fury is a dangerous seed. I knew they weren't finished. People like them never accept the mirror when it shows the truth. They'd come back louder, angrier, more desperate. And so I prepared. More cameras, more evidence, more strategy. Because, while they plotted their next move, I was already 2 steps ahead. As I secured the last camera to the barn wall one humid night, I glanced across the darkened street. Nancy and Kayla's windows glowed faintly, their silhouettes pacing behind curtains. Their movements were frantic, restless. The storm wasn't over. No, it was only building. And the next clash would not just embarrass them. It would finish them. The morning of the final confrontation began deceptively quiet. The sky stretched wide and clean, the sun painting golden stripes across the fields. My cows grazed lazily, tails flicking at flies, their calm rhythm a sharp contrast to the tension I felt coiling in my gut. I had seen the signs the night before, the sisters pacing their yard, gesturing wildly as they plotted, their anger simmering hotter than ever. Something told me today would not pass uneventfully. By mid-afternoon, the calm broke. Gravel crunched under furious footsteps, followed by the piercing voice of Nancy. "This ends now," she bellowed, her cream dress flaring as she charged toward my pasture, an axe glinting in her grip. Kayla stormed beside her, blue sundress snapping in the breeze, her voice shrill and unrelenting. They looked deranged, two women consumed by their need for control, their fury sharpened to a dangerous edge. The cows lifted their heads unflustered, their dark eyes serene in the face of chaos. One let out a long, mocking moo that rolled through the summer air. Nancy raised the axe higher, screaming, "Out! Get them out of here!" Kayla added fuel, pointing at me as if she were summoning a firing squad. "You're harboring dangerous animals. If you won't do something, we will." I didn't move. Instead, I reached into my pocket, my phone already recording, the cameras I had hidden earlier blinking red from fence posts and barn beams. My voice was low, steady. "You need to put that down before you make the biggest mistake of your life." But they were too far gone. Neighbors, drawn by the commotion, began to gather at the sidewalk. Phones rose like a forest of glowing eyes, capturing every shriek, every swing of Nancy's axe in the air. The crowd murmured, a tide of disbelief building into outrage. Kayla screamed, her face blotchy and red. "He's endangering us all. These beasts will trample our children." The absurdity of her words only deepened the scene's surreal quality. Behind her, a child no older than 8 tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering loudly, but the cows are just standing there. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Nancy, shaking with fury, turned that laughter into her enemy. She whirled, eyes blazing, and shouted, "Shut up. You don't understand." Her voice cracked, carrying the desperation of someone realizing their grip on power was slipping. And then came the sirens. The police cruiser rolled up, lights flashing, the sound slicing through the sisters' tirade. 2 officers stepped out, hands on their belts, eyes narrowing as they took in the sight. Nancy with her axe raised, Kayla trespassing inside my fence, the cows a picture of tranquility. "What's going on here?" one officer demanded. Before I could speak, Nancy lunged into her performance. "Thank God you're here. He's keeping illegal animals. They attacked us, and now he's threatening us with violence." Her voice shook with false panic, but the officers' faces remained unmoved. I stepped forward, phone in hand, and simply pressed play. The footage rolled in crisp clarity. Nancy and Kayla trespassing, screaming threats, waving weapons. The cows, unbothered, chewing and watching. The sisters' lies unraveled in front of them. The crowd laughed, gasped, even booed. Phones captured the moment from every angle. Nancy's jaw dropped. Kayla stammered, That's edited." The officer held up his hand. "We're watching you do it live right now. Put the axe down. Now." The silence that followed was suffocating. Nancy's arm trembled, her knuckles white around the handle. At last, with a choke sound, she let it drop into the grass. The thud echoed like a gavel. The officers stepped forward, firm and deliberate. One read Nancy her rights, as he placed her in cuffs for menacing and trespassing. Kayla's protests turned shrill as another officer cited her for harassment and property violations. The sisters struggled, screamed, but their words were drowned out by the collective judgment of the neighborhood. People cheered, some clapped, and one man shouted, "Leave the cows alone." The sisters were led to the cruiser, their fury reduced to incoherent screams muffled by the slam of car doors. The crowd dispersed slowly, buzzing with energy, laughter, and relief hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. I stood by the fence, exhaling for what felt like the first time in weeks. The cows went back to grazing, as if nothing had happened, tails swishing lazily. One nudged my arm with its damp nose, and I almost laughed at the absurdity. They had been the eye of the storm all along, calm witnesses to human chaos. That evening, as the sun sank low and the fields glowed gold, I sat on the porch, sipping coffee while scrolling through my phone. The videos had spread even further. National outlets, meme pages, countless commenters delighting in the downfall of the self-proclaimed enforcers. Nancy and Kayla were infamous now, symbols of entitlement defeated by their own arrogance. The HOA, scrambling to salvage its reputation, sent an email distancing itself from the sisters. By week's end, they were removed from the board entirely. The apology letter that arrived in my mailbox was brief and stiff, but it was still an admission of their failure. The cows, it seemed, had won. And yet, as satisfying as it was to see justice served, I couldn't shake the lingering question. What happens when people like Nancy and Kayla lose everything they thought they controlled? Do they retreat quietly, or do they plot in the shadows, waiting for another chance to strike? The cicadas buzzed in the warm night air, and my cows shifted in the pasture, their dark shapes steady against the horizon. I knew one thing for certain. If they ever tried again, I'd be ready. Because this farm, this land, wasn't just property. It was a line drawn in the dirt. And no one, no matter how loud or entitled, was going to cross it without consequences. And that's how it all went down. Karma served piping hot, just the way we like it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment, and share it with a friend who loves a good dose of neighborhood drama. And of course, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next wild ride. I'd also love to hear from you. What kind of story do you want to see next? More HOA meltdowns, workplace chaos, or maybe a family feud gone wrong? Let me know in the comments, and your idea might just be the next big tale we bring to life.